The streets were crowded, noisy, and cold. The city seemed alive with its usual chaos cars honking, people shouting, the smell of fried food mixing with the faint scent of wet pavement from a morning drizzle. She walked slowly, feeling every ache in her body, dragging her warm shoes across the uneven sidewalk. Her coat was thin, not enough to keep out the chill, and her stomach had been empty for hours. Each step reminded her of how far she had fallen from the life she once knew. She was young, barely in her 20s, but life had already taught her harsh lessons. Music had been her first love, the thing that gave her hope when nothing else did. As a child, she had spent hours at the piano, her small fingers learning to press the keys in perfect harmony. Her father, a man whose name had once echoed in grand concert halls, had been her teacher, her guide, and the one person who truly believed in her. He had always told her that music could speak what words could never express, that a single note could touch a soul in ways nothing else could. But now, that life seemed like a distant memory. Her father had passed away suddenly, leaving behind only his grand piano, a house filled with dust and memories, and a world that suddenly felt cold and cruel. Money was tight even before his death, and after it, there was none. Her mother had passed away years earlier, leaving her completely alone. She had tried to survive by playing music in small cafes, on street corners, and at local markets, but no one seemed to care. People would drop coins into her hat, shake their heads, and move on, leaving her with barely enough to buy bread. Today had been worse than most days. She had tried a new cafe near the main square, hoping someone might notice her talent. But the owner had only laughed when she asked if she could play for a small plate of food. He had told her, in a tone she would never forget, that music didn't pay bills, and that she should stop wasting her time. She had left with nothing but the echo of his laughter in her ears. She wandered through the streets, unsure of where to go next, and the sky was already darkening with the first signs of evening. Her stomach growled, reminding her painfully that she had not eaten since morning. She felt a wave of despair, a heaviness that made it hard to keep walking. She looked around at the people passing by, families laughing, couples holding hands, businessmen hurrying with their briefcases, and felt a sharp pang of loneliness. She wanted to be part of that world, but she had been shut out. Music had once opened doors, but now it seemed it was useless. She had talent, yes, and she had her father's legacy, but in this city, no one seemed to care. She stopped in front of a restaurant with warm lights spilling onto the street. Inside, people were eating, laughing, and enjoying themselves. The aroma of roasted meat and fresh bread wafted through the doorway, making her stomach twist in hunger. She watched the diners, the waiters, the chefs moving gracefully in their busy rhythm, and a thought struck her. A crazy, desperate thought, but one that filled her with a small spark of hope. She pushed the door open slowly, the bell above it jingling softly. Everyone turned to look at her, a young woman with tattered clothes, worn shoes, and hair that had not seen a brush in days. She felt their eyes on her, some curious, some amused, some openly judgmental. She swallowed the lump in her throat, her hands shaking slightly, and walked up to the counter. "Excuse me?" She began softly, her voice almost drowned out by the chatter in the room. The manager, a tall man with a stern expression, looked down at her. "Yes?" he asked, his tone sharp. She hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage. "Can I play for a plate of food?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air. The manager blinked, then frowned. A few of the diners laughed quietly, some smirking, thinking this was some kind of joke. "Play for food?" he said, trying to hide a chuckle. "You mean you want to perform? And eat for free?" She nodded, her eyes cast downward. She did not know if she even believed it would work. She had done everything she could to survive. Playing music for a meal might be her only chance tonight. She looked up at him, her gaze steady now, filled with quiet determination. The manager sighed and shook his head. "Well, we have a piano in the corner," he said finally, "but don't expect much. Most people who ask to play for food can barely keep a tune." He waved a hand toward a dusty upright piano tucked in the corner of the restaurant. Its black paint was chipped and the keys were yellowed with age, but it was still a piano dot. She thanked him quietly and walked over, her heart pounding. The diners whispered among themselves, some laughing softly, others curious. A few of the younger children stared wide-eyed, sensing that something different was about to happen. She opened the piano lid and ran her fingers over the keys. The sound was dull at first, a little uneven, but familiar and comforting. It felt like coming home after a long, painful journey. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes, and remembered her father's hands on the piano. She remembered his voice, calm and encouraging, telling her that music was not about perfection. It was about emotion, about speaking with the heart. She let her fingers find the keys, and slowly a melody began to emerge. It started softly, almost timidly, as if testing the waters, but soon it grew into something richer, something full of life and feeling. The diners gradually stopped their chatter. Some looked around, unsure what they were hearing. Others leaned forward, their expressions shifting from amusement to surprise. The notes floated through the air, gentle and haunting, carrying with them a story of struggle, loss, and hope. Even the manager stopped cleaning the counter, watching her closely now, a new respect forming in his eyes. She did not play for applause, for recognition, or even for the plate of food she so desperately needed. She played because she had to. Each note was a release, a way to let go of the fear, the hunger, and the loneliness. Each chord carried a memory of her father, of the hours spent learning, practicing, and dreaming. She lost herself in the music, feeling a sense of freedom she had not felt in months. By the time she finished her first piece, the restaurant was completely silent. The laughter had vanished, replaced by awe and disbelief. People looked at each other, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Some diners' eyes were moist, moved by the unexpected beauty in front of them. She opened her eyes, breathing heavily, her hands hovering over the last keys. She did not smile or bow. She simply looked around, waiting to see what would happen next. The manager stepped forward slowly. His face softened now, no trace of the earlier skepticism. "That was incredible," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I didn't expect that." He paused, then gestured toward the kitchen. "Get her something to eat." She earned it. A waiter quickly brought a small plate of food, and she sat down quietly, eating slowly, savoring every bite. But more than the food, what warmed her was the realization that her music still mattered, that even in the darkest, most desperate moments, her talent could reach others, could make them pause, could remind them of the power of music. As she ate, she thought about her father, about all the times he had encouraged her to practice, to believe in herself, to never give up. She realized that she had carried his lessons with her all this time, even when she thought she had lost everything. And tonight, in that small restaurant, she had touched people's hearts. She had reminded herself, and perhaps the world, that talent and perseverance cannot be ignored, no matter how humble the beginnings. She finished her meal and thanked the manager quietly, her voice stronger now, filled with newfound confidence. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. She left the restaurant, stepping back into the bustling streets, but this time she did not feel small or defeated. She felt alive, capable, and ready to face whatever came next. The city still roared around her, indifferent and chaotic, but she walked taller, her head held high. She had played for food, yes, but what she had received in return was more valuable than any meal, a reminder of her purpose, her talent, and the music that flowed through her veins. And though she did not yet know what the future held, she knew one thing with certainty: she would never stop playing. Because music was not just a skill or a talent, it was her life, her voice, and her connection to the world. And the world, she realized, was listening. The next morning, she woke up with the faint sound of the city stirring outside her small room. The sunlight streamed through a cracked window, illuminating the sparse furniture and the threadbare carpet. She sat on the edge of her bed, feeling the soreness in her legs and shoulders from the long walk and the night spent with little food. Yet despite the fatigue, there was a warmth in her chest she had not felt in weeks, a spark of hope. The memory of the restaurant lingered, the faces of those who had listened to her music still vivid in her mind. She dressed quickly, pulling on the same worn clothes she had the day before. She knew she needed to find another place to perform, somewhere that could offer her not just food, but perhaps a chance to be seen by someone who could understand her talent. She walked the familiar streets, the sounds of the morning, a street vendor calling out his wares, the rhythmic clatter of a tram, the distant honk of impatient drivers mixing into a kind of chaotic symphony that reminded her of the city's heartbeat. She passed by a small music store, the kind that sold sheet music, second-hand instruments, and occasionally hosted amateur performers. She paused at the window, staring at a grand piano displayed inside. Its polished surface gleamed under the morning sun, and she could almost hear the notes it might produce if she sat at it. She pressed her hands against the glass, imagining the music she could create, and felt a pang of longing. But she knew she couldn't just enter a store and play without permission. She needed another plan, another chance. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her again that she hadn't eaten. She thought of the restaurant from the night before, and the small kindness of the manager who had allowed her play. She wondered if she should try again, but the city was full of restaurants and cafes, many of them bustling with people who would barely notice a young woman asking to play for a meal. She walked on, her mind turning over ideas, until she reached a small square where street performers often gathered. Musicians, dancers, and artists created a patchwork of sound and movement, each trying to earn a few coins from passers-by. She set down her bag and opened it carefully, revealing her small violin case. The instrument inside was old, its strings worn, but still capable of producing a clear, sweet sound. She took it out, tuned it as best as she could, and took a deep breath. The first few notes were shaky, uncertain, but as she played, the music grew steadier, flowing with the memories of her father's lessons. People began to stop, some out of curiosity, some out of genuine interest. A few tossed coins into the open case at her feet, but most moved on, their faces distant or indifferent. As she played, she noticed a group of young women sitting on a nearby bench, watching her quietly. They whispered to each other, smiling, and occasionally clapped softly. One of them approached, holding a smartphone. "You're really good," she said. "Do you perform anywhere regularly?" The young woman shook her head. "No, I just play when I can," she replied softly. She felt a flicker of embarrassment at the attention. Unused to strangers complimenting her in such a direct way, the woman with the phone smiled. "You should record this. People would love to hear it." She gestured to the group on the bench, who nodded enthusiastically. The young musician felt a warmth in her chest. It was the first real encouragement she had received in weeks. She smiled shyly and continued playing, letting the music flow, filling the square with notes that seemed to hover in the morning air. A man in a suit stopped nearby, listening with an expression of mild curiosity. He was older, with silver streaks in his hair and a quiet demeanor that suggested he had seen a lot in his life. He didn't drop any coins into her case, nor did he clap immediately. He simply stood there, arms crossed, letting the music wash over him. When she finished a piece, he spoke. "You have talent," he said quietly. "More than most people ever see. Who taught you?" She hesitated, unsure whether to reveal her past. "My father," she said finally. "He was a musician." Her voice faltered slightly, the memories of him so close it felt like he was still standing beside her. The man nodded, a faint smile appearing on his face. "I see it," he said. "It's in the way you play." He must have been very proud. She nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She wasn't used to compliments, especially ones that recognized her skill and the legacy behind it. Most days she had felt invisible, a shadow wandering through a city that didn't care. But now, for a moment, she felt seen. Truly seen. The group of young women returned, holding the phone. "We want to record you," one said. "We think people should hear this." She shook her head gently. I don't know if I should," she murmured. The older man beside her placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's your choice," he said. "But don't hide what you can give the world. Not everyone gets a chance like this." Her hands trembled slightly as she considered the offer. She thought about her father again, how he would have encouraged her to share her music, to let it be heard. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "But just one song." They set up the phone carefully, positioning it so that the violin and her hands were in view. She took a deep breath, letting the city square fade around her, and played. The music poured out, full of emotion, full of life, carrying with it years of practice, pain, hope, and love. As the notes filled the air, more people stopped. Children gathered at the edges of the square, parents paused in their errands, and even the street vendors seemed to slow, listening for a moment. The man in the suit stayed nearby, watching intently, as if measuring the depth of her skill and the sincerity of her performance. When she finished, the applause was quiet at first, then grew louder as more people realized what they had just witnessed. The young women with the phone clapped enthusiastically. "That was amazing," one exclaimed. "You have to share this online." She smiled, a small, shy smile, feeling the thrill of being appreciated. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt that her music could open doors again, that it could reach people in ways that begging or pleading never could. The older man approached her again. "You're more than a street musician," he said. "You have a gift, and you need to be in places where people can truly understand it. Don't waste it here, playing only for coins." She looked down at her case, at the few coins scattered inside. They had helped her yesterday, and they helped a little today, but she knew he was right. She wanted more than survival. She wanted to live her music, to let it grow, to let it touch hearts as it had touched hers. The man reached into his coat pocket and handed her a card. "This is the number of someone who can help you," he said. "They organize concerts, recitals, and events for talented musicians who are struggling. Call them. You don't have to stay hidden anymore." She took the card with trembling hands, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. She had never had anyone offer her real help like this before. Usually, people either ignored her or laughed. This time, someone believed in her. As the morning turned into afternoon, she played a few more pieces, allowing the people in the square to hear her. With every note, she felt her confidence growing. She was no longer just a girl asking for food or coins. She was a musician, the daughter of a man who had once filled grand halls with applause, and someone who still had the power to move others with her talent. By the time the sun reached its peak, she had earned a few coins, a plate of food, and more importantly, a sense of purpose. She packed up her violin, careful not to damage it, and tucked the card safely into her coat. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, rejections, and long nights of uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that she was not alone in her struggle. She had a direction, a chance to reclaim her music, and the memory of her father guiding her hands. She walked through the city streets, the sounds around her now familiar, almost comforting. Each step felt lighter, each breath freer. She passed by the small music store again, and this time she paused to imagine herself performing inside, with people listening quietly, captivated by her music. It felt possible. It felt real. That evening, she found a quiet spot on a park bench, resting after the long day. She opened her violin case and looked at the instrument, feeling a wave of gratitude. It had been her companion through the darkest times, her voice when she had none. She held it carefully, remembering the lessons her father had taught her. The hours spent practicing, the dreams of performing on stages that seemed unreachable now dot as the city lights flickered on. She closed her eyes and began to play softly, just for herself this time. The notes floated into the night air, blending with the distant sounds of traffic and laughter. She played with feeling, with memory, with hope. And in that quiet moment, she understood something important. No matter how many obstacles lay ahead, music would always be her way forward, her way to be seen, her way to survive. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts, and new obstacles. But she also knew that she had a gift, one that could not be ignored. And as long as she had her music, she would never truly be lost again. The next morning, the young musician woke with a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. The card the man had given her the day before rested on the small wooden table beside her bed. She had looked at it countless times, tracing the letters with her finger, imagining what might happen if she called the number. Her stomach fluttered with both fear and hope. For weeks, months even, she had been surviving from one day to the next, never daring to imagine a real opportunity could come her way. Now it felt possible, but it also felt frightening. She dressed carefully, brushing her hair as best as she could, though it was still a little tangled from restless sleep. Her coat was patched in several places, her shoes scuffed, yet she carried herself with a sense of quiet determination. Today she would take a step forward, a step she had been dreaming of for so long. She tucked the card into her coat pocket and stepped out into the city streets. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of bread from nearby bakeries and the faint aroma of wet asphalt. She walked with her violin case in one hand, feeling the weight of it, both literally and symbolically. It had been her companion through every struggle, and now it was a bridge to a future she dared to hope for. The streets were beginning to fill with the rhythm of daily life street vendors setting up their stalls, children laughing as they ran to school, and the occasional bell from trams passing by. She moved through it all quietly, yet with purpose. Eventually, she arrived at a small building tucked between two larger structures, the kind that people often overlooked if they were not paying attention. A brass plaque near the door read, "Music Opportunities and Talent Agency." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest, and pushed the door open. The smell of polished wood and faint perfume of pianos greeted her, and a small bell jingled as she stepped inside. A woman behind the counter looked up, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Can I help you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Yes," the young musician said, her voice steady but soft. I was given this card yesterday. Someone said you could help musicians." She handed it over, and the woman examined it carefully, then looked back at her. "Ah," she said, a smile touching her lips. "I see. You must be the violinist who performed in the square yesterday. Please, have a seat." She walked toward the small waiting area, settling into a chair. She noticed the walls were lined with photographs of musicians. Some young, some older, all captured mid-performance. lost in the beauty of their art. For a moment, she felt a pang of envy. These people had opportunities, recognition, perhaps even comfort. But she quickly pushed it aside. Today was her day to step into that world, to claim a piece of what she had long dreamed of. A few minutes later, the woman from the desk returned with a man who appeared to be in his 40s. His presence was calm but commanding. "Hello," he said warmly. "I heard about your performance yesterday. People were talking. Why don't you show me what you can do?" She felt a wave of nerves, but she nodded and unpacked her violin. The man gestured toward a small room in the back with a piano and a music stand. "Go ahead," he said. "Play whatever you like." She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and then began to play. At first, the notes were tentative, just as they had been in the square, but soon they grew stronger, fuller, carrying the emotion she had been holding inside for months. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The man listened silently, his eyes occasionally closing, as if he too was letting the music wash over him. When she finished, she lowered the violin and opened her eyes. The room was silent for a moment. Then the man clapped softly. "Remarkable," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You have technique, yes, but more importantly, you have feeling. That is what separates the good from the extraordinary. Tell me about your training." She spoke softly, her words careful but honest. "My father taught me. He was a pianist and composer. He passed away recently. Since then, I've been trying to survive while still playing. I know I have talent, but I didn't know if anyone would care anymore." The man nodded slowly, taking in her story. "Talent like yours should not be hidden in the streets. It belongs on stages and halls where people can truly hear it. I can arrange auditions, performances, maybe even recording sessions. But it will not be easy. You will need discipline, practice, and courage." She nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said simply. The man smiled. "Good. We'll start by introducing you to some opportunities for local performances. If those go well, we'll look into bigger stages, competitions, even scholarships. Music has the power to open doors, but you must be willing to step through them." For the first time in a long time, she felt hope swelling inside her. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, it felt almost unreal. She spent the next few hours talking with the staff, filling out forms and discussing her musical history, repertoire, and goals. They were kind, patient, and genuinely interested in helping her succeed. When she finally stepped back out onto the streets, the sun was high, warming her face. She carried her violin case with a new sense of pride. It was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a key to the future she had only dared to imagine. She walked through the streets, feeling the energy of the city differently this time. Every sound, every passing person seemed to carry potential, not obstacles. That evening, she returned to the square where she had performed before, but this time it was different. She was no longer playing for food or coins. She was playing because she wanted to share her music, to practice, and to connect with anyone who might be listening. People gathered as they had before. Some familiar faces from yesterday, others new. Curious about the young woman who had captured attention the day before Dot as she played, she noticed the reactions were changing. People were stopping, smiling, and some even whispering to each other about how beautiful her music was. Children danced around her feet, and the older man from yesterday returned, clapping softly. He nodded at her, a quiet encouragement. She smiled back, feeling a connection to the people around her. The next few weeks passed in a blur of music, meetings, and small performances. The agency arranged for her to play at local cafes, charity events, and even a small recital at a community hall. Each performance built her confidence, and she began to see that her music could truly reach others. She started keeping a journal, noting down pieces she wanted to learn, compositions she wanted to try, and reflections on how the music made her feel. Despite the progress, life was still not easy. She struggled to balance travel, practice, and her limited finances. There were days when she felt exhausted, frustrated, and unsure if she could continue. Yet, every time she played, she felt renewed. Music reminded her why she endured, why she had survived so far, and why she could not give up now. One afternoon, she was invited to play at a small recital in front of a group of local musicians and music enthusiasts. The hall was modest, but for her, it was a step closer to the stages she had dreamed of. She arrived early, setting up her violin and rehearsing quietly. The audience trickled in, taking seats, chatting softly, and glancing toward the young musician in anticipation. When the recital began, she felt her nerves rising. She had played on streets, in squares, and in small rooms, but performing in front of a seated audience, all focused on her, felt different. She closed her eyes, drew in a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were gentle, yet precise. As the piece progressed, her confidence grew, each note flowing naturally, each pause filled with meaning. The audience listened in rapt attention, moved by the depth and emotion in her performance. By the time she finished, the hall was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. She bowed humbly, feeling a warmth she had never felt before. People came forward to compliment her, offering kind words, encouragement, and even invitations to perform elsewhere. She felt the truth of what the agency had told her. Her music had the power to open doors. And now, she was finally stepping through them. As she packed her violin that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the cold streets, the empty stomachs, and the nights of uncertainty, to this moment of recognition and hope, she realized how far she had come. She thought of her father, imagining him smiling proudly, and felt a surge of gratitude. Every struggle, every tear, every note she had played on the streets had led her to this point. She walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, the city quieting down for the night. The sounds that had once seemed overwhelming now felt comforting, familiar, and even welcoming. She felt a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time, a belief that her talent, her passion, and her determination could carry her to places she had only dreamed of. That night, as she lay down to sleep, she held her violin close. She knew that the road ahead would still have obstacles, doubts, and challenges. But she also knew that she had taken the first real steps toward reclaiming her life, her music, and her future. And with that thought, a quiet smile crossed her lips, a smile of hope, determination, and the knowledge that her journey was just beginning. The days that followed were filled with a whirlwind of activity. The young musician's life had shifted from surviving on the streets to stepping into a world that was entirely new to her. Each morning, she woke with a mixture of excitement and nerves, unsure what the day would bring, but eager to face it. The card she had been given by the older man had led her to opportunities she had only dreamed of. Yet each step forward felt both exhilarating and daunting. Her schedule was now busy. The agency arranged for her to play at different locations: a small theater for local music students, a community center hosting charity events, and a private gathering for patrons who supported young artists. Each performance brought its own challenges. Sometimes she would arrive to find the audience smaller than expected or distracted, and other times she would feel the weight of expectations pressing down on shoulders. But no matter the circumstances, she played with the same passion she had always carried, letting the music speak when words were not enough. One afternoon, she was asked to perform at a special event organized by a local music foundation. The venue was a modest hall, yet it carried an air of sophistication she had rarely encountered outside of her father's old recital stories. The audience consisted of music teachers, students, and a few local critics. She felt a nervous flutter in her chest as she walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the seats filled, and for the first time, she was aware of how many eyes were on her, all waiting to see what she could do. She adjusted the violin under her chin, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were delicate, precise, almost whispering, and immediately the hall fell silent. The music flowed from her fingers like a river, carrying with it a depth of emotion that seemed to touch every listener. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Others leaned forward in their seats, mesmerized by the unexpected power and control in her playing. She felt herself lose track of time, completely immersed in the music, as if nothing else existed outside of the notes she produced. When she finished the piece, there was a pause of quiet, almost reverent silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. It was different from the clapping she had received on the streets or in small gatherings. This was applause filled with respect and recognition, a validation of her skill and the hard work she had put in over the years. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. After the performance, a woman approached her. She was older, with gentle eyes and a calm voice. "You have incredible talent," she said. "I recognize the training. You have the precision, the emotion, and something more, something that cannot be taught. Tell me about your background." The young musician hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "My father was a pianist and a teacher. He taught me everything I know about music. After he passed, I had to find a way to survive. I played on the streets, in squares, wherever I could. I didn't know if anyone would ever notice again." The woman smiled, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "I can see that he left you more than just technique. He left you his spirit, his passion, and his dedication. You have something rare, something that deserves to be shared with the world. You must continue, and you must let people see the depth of your talent." Her words resonated deeply. The young musician realized that her father's legacy was still alive within her. She had thought she was alone, that the world had moved on without her, but here was someone who understood. She felt a renewed determination to embrace her path fully, to honor her father's memory by giving her all to her music. That evening, she walked home slowly, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement from a light rain earlier. She held her violin close, thinking about the day's events, the people she had met, and the encouragement she had received. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of direction, a feeling that her music could truly lead her to something meaningful. As the weeks passed, her reputation began to grow. Word of the young violinist who had played for food and now captivated audiences began to spread. Local newspapers ran small stories about her performances, emphasizing her talent and her remarkable journey. People who had once laughed at her request to play for a meal now watched her with admiration, eager to hear her perform. Invitations started to arrive, some small, some more significant. Each opportunity brought her closer to the life she had longed for. Yet she remained grounded, remembering the hunger, the cold nights, and the uncertainty that had shaped her resilience. One day, the agency informed her that a renowned music academy had heard about her performances and wanted to invite her for a special audition. The academy was known for training exceptional musicians and providing scholarships to those who showed extraordinary promise. The young musician felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was a chance she had dreamed of, yet the pressure felt immense. She spent days preparing, practicing tirelessly, going over pieces she had mastered, and pushing herself to refine every note, every pause, every expression. The day of the audition arrived. She walked into the academy, her hands trembling slightly as she carried her violin case. The hall was large, filled with the scent of polished wood and the quiet hum of anticipation. Judges sat at a long table, their eyes focused, their expressions serious. She felt the weight of their scrutiny, the potential for both success and failure resting on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, remembering her father's words. Music is not about perfection. It is about speaking with your heart. She lifted the violin to her chin, closed her eyes, and began to play. The notes flowed effortlessly, each one carrying her story, her struggles, her dreams. The judges listened in silence, captivated by the depth and emotion in her performance. Some leaned forward, impressed by her technique and control, while others seemed moved by the soul in her music. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment. Then a judge spoke. "Your talent is remarkable. The emotion you convey is extraordinary. You have the potential to achieve greatness." She felt tears prick her eyes, not from relief alone, but from the overwhelming sense of validation. For years, she had questioned her worth, her abilities, and whether anyone would ever recognize her talent. Now, here was proof that her music mattered, that her struggles had not been in vain. The judges discussed her performance among themselves and then addressed her again. "We would like to offer you a scholarship to study here. You have the skill, the dedication, and the heart to succeed. With proper guidance, you can achieve anything." Her chest swelled with a mixture of joy, disbelief, and gratitude. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Leaving the academy, she felt a lightness she had not known in years. The city streets seemed brighter, the air crisper, and the possibilities endless. She knew that her journey was far from over. There would be challenges, demanding practice, and moments of doubt, but for the first time, she truly believed in herself and her future. That evening, she returned to the square where she had first performed for food, now carrying her violin with a sense of pride. People recognized her as she walked past, some nodding in respect, others smiling warmly. She set up in the same spot, but this time she did not play for coins or attention. She played for herself, for the music, and for the joy of sharing it with anyone willing to listen. The crowd that gathered was larger than before, drawn by stories of her talent and the determination she had shown. Some were curious, some were there to support her, and others simply wanted to experience the music that had captivated so many. She began to play, the notes rising and falling, weaving a tapestry of sound that spoke of hardship, hope, and resilience. The people listened in awe, moved not just by her skill, but by the story her music told, the story of a young woman who had faced despair and emerged stronger. Determined to share her gift with the world. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. People cheered, some clapping repeatedly, others calling out words of encouragement. She smiled, bowing humbly, feeling a warmth that went beyond the sound of the crowd. She realized that her journey had changed her not just as a musician, but as a person. She had learned resilience, patience, and the power of believing in herself, even when the world seemed indifferent. That night, as she walked home, she reflected on the twists and turns that had brought her to this point. From begging for food to receiving recognition and opportunities, from the cold streets to the warmth of a growing audience, she had come far. Yet she knew there was still a long way to go. She carried her violin, her memories, and her dreams close, knowing that her journey was just beginning. Sitting on her small bed that night, she held the instrument carefully, closing her eyes and letting the day's experiences sink in. She thought of her father, imagining him smiling proudly, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her music had not only sustained her, but had begun to open doors to a future she had only dared to imagine. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It was courage, persistence, and belief in oneself that truly carried a person forward. She knew the road ahead would have obstacles, but she felt ready to face them. She had survived the streets, captured hearts in the square, and impressed those who could guide her toward her dreams. Now she had a path, an SH. The young musician woke to the soft light of morning, streaming through the cracked window of her small room. Today was not just another day of practice or street performances. Today she was preparing for something that felt monumental. The Music Academy had informed her that she would have the chance to perform at a local music showcase attended by well-known instructors, critics, and a few representatives from larger institutions. This could be the turning point in her life, a moment where her talent would be seen by people who could truly shape her future. She rose from the bed slowly, feeling both excitement and nerves pressing against her chest. She had been practicing tirelessly for weeks, refining each piece, perfecting every note, every pause, every expression. Yet, despite her preparation, there was a quiet fear deep inside her. The fear of failing, of being overlooked, of not living up to the expectations she was now placing on herself. She pushed it aside, reminding herself of all she had already overcome. From the cold streets to playing for a plate of food, from moments of doubt to small triumphs, she had survived every challenge. This was just the next one, and she was ready. She dressed neatly, carefully brushing her hair and adjusting her worn coat. It was still patched and old, but it carried the history of her journey, and she refused to feel ashamed of it. She tucked her violin case securely under her arm and stepped out into the bustling streets. The city was alive with its usual noise vendors, calling out their goods. The sound of trams and cars, the chatter of people hurrying to their destinations. But today, it all felt different. Today, she felt that the city itself was a stage, and she was ready to perform. Arriving at the music showcase, she was struck by the size and elegance of the hall. It was filled with polished wooden floors, high ceilings, and rows of seats that stretched back further than she could see. She felt a flicker of awe and a twinge of nervousness. This was a space she had only ever dreamed of, and now she was about to stand in it and let her music speak. Other musicians were already present, tuning instruments, practicing quietly, and talking amongst themselves. Some glanced at her as she passed, curiosity or polite recognition in their eyes, but mostly, she felt a quiet determination to focus only on herself. She was assigned a room to warm up in. It was small, yet filled with the faint, comforting scent of varnished wood and polished instruments. She unpacked her violin, checking the strings carefully, and began to play softly. The notes flowed easily at first, and more deliberately as she focused on each phrase, each articulation. She could feel her heart beating faster, her hands slightly trembling. But she allowed herself to breathe through it, letting the music guide her into a calm, focused state. When the time came for her performance, she was led onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience was seated in orderly rows, all eyes turning toward her. She took a deep breath, lifting her violin to her chin. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The noise of the city outside, the worries, the fatigue, all of it faded away. Only the music remained, only the story she wanted to tell with her instrument. She began to play. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but they carried with them an unmistakable sense of purpose. The melody grew steadily, filled with emotion, passion, and the skill she had honed over years of practice. Her fingers moved across the strings with precision, yet the music felt alive, breathing, and expressive. Every note seemed to speak of her journey, from the hardship of surviving on the streets to the quiet triumphs she had achieved along the way. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her, drawn into the story her music told. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling the depth of her talent and the sincerity of her performance. She played with everything she had, not for recognition or reward, but for the music itself, for the truth it carried. It was a performance filled with both skill and heart, the kind that touched listeners on a level deeper than technique alone could reach. By the time she reached the final notes, the hall was silent. Every listener seemed frozen, caught in the final echo of her music. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room. First a few hands clapped, then more, until the hall was filled with enthusiastic, heartfelt applause. The young musician lowered her violin, her chest heaving slightly, and allowed herself a small, shy smile. For the first time, she truly felt seen, not just for her skill, but for the depth of her artistry, for the story she carried within her music. After the performance, several instructors and critics approached her. Their words were filled with admiration and encouragement. "You have an extraordinary gift," one said, shaking her hand. "The emotion in your music is incredible. With proper guidance, you could go very far." Another added, "Your technique is remarkable, but what really stands out is your soul. You play with understanding and feeling that few can achieve." She listened quietly, her heart swelling with gratitude and humility. For so long, she had doubted herself, worried that her struggles had left her talent unnoticed. But now, in this room filled with experienced musicians and teachers, she realized that her journey had not been in vain. Every moment of hardship, every night of uncertainty, had shaped her into the musician she was today, a musician who could move hearts, even in the most discerning of audiences. Later that evening, she was invited to speak briefly with one of the Academy representatives. "We would like to offer you a more permanent place in our program," the representative said. "We can provide resources, mentoring, and the chance to perform on larger stages. We believe you have the potential to achieve greatness, and we want to help you get there." Her eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined a future like this, a life where her music could flourish and be recognized by those who truly understood it. She nodded, her voice trembling but steady. "Thank you. I won't waste this opportunity. I promise to give it everything I have." The representative smiled warmly. "We believe you will. Talent like yours, combined with determination and passion, is rare. You are ready for this next step." Leaving the hall that evening, the young musician felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. The city streets, which had once felt harsh and unforgiving, now seemed filled with possibility. She carried her violin with pride, a symbol of her talent, her perseverance, and the journey that had brought her to this moment. She walked with a new sense of confidence, knowing that her music could open doors that had once seemed forever closed. Over the next few weeks, her life became a delicate balance of intense practice, performances, and navigating new opportunities. She attended lessons, workshops, and rehearsals, learning from instructors who guided her with patience and insight. Each session pushed her to refine her technique, expand her repertoire, and explore new ways of expressing emotion through her instrument. She faced challenges and occasional self-doubt, but every obstacle was met with determination, the memory of her past struggles serving as both motivation and reminder of how far she had come. Her performances continued to draw attention. Local newspapers and online publications wrote about the young violinist, whose journey had started with playing for a plate of food. People were fascinated not only by her talent, but also by her resilience and determination. She received invitations to perform at community events, charity fundraisers, and small concerts. Each performance was an opportunity to reach new audiences, to touch hearts, and to grow as both a musician and a person. Despite the increasing recognition, she remained humble. She never forgot the cold streets, the empty stomachs, and the nights of uncertainty. Those experiences had shaped her, and she carried them with her as a reminder of the importance of perseverance, gratitude, and empathy. Every note she played, every performance she gave, was infused with the depth of her experiences, making her music resonate in a way that few others could achieve. One evening, after a particularly successful performance at a local cultural event, she walked home slowly, savoring the quiet of the city at night. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens. She reflected on how far she had come from surviving on the streets, to playing in squares for spare coins, to performing in halls filled with people who genuinely appreciated her talent. Each step of her journey had been filled with challenges. Yet each step had also brought her closer to the life she had dreamed of. As she reached her small room, she unpacked her violin and sat on the bed, reflecting on the day. She thought of her father, imagining him smiling proudly, knowing that his teachings had guided her not only in technique, but in understanding the true purpose of music. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that every hardship, every moment of doubt, and every small triumph had prepared her for this life. She played softly for herself that night, letting the music fill the room. The notes carried the story of her journey, her struggles, her hopes, her dreams, and her resilience. Playing for herself, without an audience, reminded her of why she had started this journey in the first place: the love of music, the need to express what words could not, and the connection it created with the world around her. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a quiet confidence. She knew the road ahead would continue to have challenge. The day began with a quiet excitement in the air. The young musician had been preparing for weeks, and today was the culmination of everything she had worked for. She was to perform at a major recital organized by a well-known cultural foundation. This was not just another local event. It was a gathering that included accomplished musicians, patrons of the arts, and even journalists from respected publications. It was an opportunity that could truly define her future. She woke early, her heart racing with anticipation. Even after all the experiences she had gone through, there was a flutter of nerves she could not quite suppress. She dressed carefully, choosing the simplest attire that still felt presentable, and carried her violin with reverence. It had been with her through the harshest moments of her life, and now accompanied her into a moment of potential triumph. As she arrived at the venue, she paused to take it all in. The hall was grand, with high ceilings, polished wooden floors, and a stage that seemed to stretch endlessly. Lights glimmered off crystal chandeliers, casting warm reflections across the seats. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous energy swirling inside her. She had performed in halls before, but none like this. The sheer size and elegance were both intimidating and inspiring. Backstage, musicians and performers were busy warming up, adjusting instruments, and discussing their pieces with instructors. Some glanced at her with curiosity, others with polite recognition. She felt a familiar twinge of uncertainty. Could she hold her own among such talented individuals? She reminded herself of the journey that had brought her here, the cold streets, the nights of hunger, the moments of doubt. If she had survived those, she could face anything on this stage. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. The audience was vast, and the expectation palpable. She placed her violin under her chin, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the entire journey, the struggles, the victories, and the unwavering desire to make her father proud. Then, slowly, she began to play. The first notes were delicate, almost tentative, but soon grew stronger, richer, and more confident. Each phrase carried emotion, longing, joy, sorrow, hope blending seamlessly with her technique. She played not just with skill, but with soul. Every movement of her fingers, every pause, every dynamic shift told a story that resonated with everyone in the room. Some in the audience closed their eyes, drawn into the music. Others leaned forward, mesmerized by her talent. As she continued, the music seemed to take on a life of its own. She felt herself becoming part of the melody, as if her struggles, dreams, and memories were all merging into the sound. The memory of her father's gentle guidance filled her mind, his voice encouraging her to pour herself into the music, to play with honesty and heart. She remembered the cold nights on the streets, the hunger, and the moments when she had thought she would never be seen. All of it now fueled her performance, giving it depth that no mere technique could provide. The audience listened in silence, hanging on every note. Even the seasoned critics and instructors seemed captivated, their expressions softening as the music touched them. She played through the entire piece without faltering, completely absorbed in the world she was creating with her violin. By the final note, the hall was still for a moment, as if holding its breath, before erupting into applause that seemed to shake the walls. Tears welled in her eyes as she lowered her instrument, overwhelmed by the response. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, moved not only by the skill she had displayed, but by the sincerity and emotion that had poured from her performance. She bowed, her heart racing, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. This was more than recognition. It was validation that she had survived, persevered, and emerged stronger. After the performance, several prominent musicians approached her. "Your talent is extraordinary," one said, shaking her hand. "I have rarely seen such a combination of technical skill and emotional depth in someone so young." Another added, "You have a gift that cannot be ignored. I encourage you to continue, to challenge yourself, and to share your music with the world. There is no limit to what you can achieve." The young musician listened quietly, absorbing the praise with humility. She thought of the streets, of the plates of food she had once begged for in exchange for music, and of the countless small stages that had prepared her for this moment. She realized that every hardship had been a step leading her to this point, shaping her into a musician who could touch hearts and inspire others. Later that evening, the foundation's director invited her to a private discussion. "We would like to offer you a full scholarship to further your studies," he said. "You will have access to the best instructors, performance opportunities, and the support needed to develop your talent fully. We believe in your potential and want to help you achieve it." Her eyes filled with tears. For years, she had dreamed of a life where her music could be more than survival, a life where her talent could be nurtured and appreciated. Now that dream was becoming reality. She nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you. I promise to give everything I have." Over the following months, her life transformed. She moved into a small apartment closer to the music academy, where she could dedicate herself fully to her studies. Her days were filled with lessons, rehearsals, and practice, and she embraced the rigorous schedule with determination. She explored new compositions, experimented with different styles, and honed her technique under the guidance of experienced instructors. Her performances continued to grow in frequency and scale. She played in community concerts, charity events, and even on small televised programs, gaining recognition and admiration. Yet despite the increasing attention, she remained humble, remembering the streets and the people who had once dismissed her. She played with sincerity, letting her music carry her experiences and emotions to every listener. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious city concert hall, one of the finest venues in the region. The opportunity felt monumental, a chance to stand on a stage she had only imagined in her dreams. She spent weeks preparing, choosing pieces that would challenge her technically, while allowing her to express her deepest emotions. Her violin became an extension of herself, every note a reflection of her journey, every phrase a testament to resilience and hope. The night of the performance arrived. The hall was grand, filled with an audience that included music critics, instructors, students, and patrons who had supported her journey. As she stepped onto the stage, she felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of nervousness, excitement, and gratitude. She closed her eyes, recalling the long path that had led her here, the cold streets, the nights of hunger, the moments of doubt, the small victories, and the encouragement of those who had believed in her. She lifted her violin to her chin and began to play. The first notes filled the hall, delicate yet precise, carrying with them the full weight of her experience. As the performance continued, her confidence grew, the music flowing effortlessly from her fingers. Each note spoke of struggle, determination, and hope, resonating deeply with the audience. People were moved, some leaning forward in rapt attention, others closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them. When she finished, the hall erupted into a standing ovation. The applause was thunderous, filled with admiration and awe. She lowered her violin, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the recognition and the journey that had brought her here. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Her music had survived the streets, the hardships, and the doubt, and now it was celebrated and cherished. After the performance, she was approached by several influential figures in the music world. "Your talent is exceptional," one said. "The depth of your emotion and the clarity of your technique are rare. You have a gift that deserves the largest stages." Another added, "I encourage you to continue pushing boundaries, to share your story and your music. The world needs musicians like you." She nodded, humbled by the praise, but also deeply aware of the journey that had led her here. She thought of her father, imagining him smiling proudly, knowing that his lessons and love had guided her to this point. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for every challenge, every setback, and every small triumph that had shaped her into the musician she had become. In the months that followed, her career flourished. She traveled to perform in different cities, collaborating with other talented musicians and participating in competitions that showcased her skills to wider audiences. She continued her studies, refining her technique and exploring new musical expressions. Through it all, she remained grounded, remembering the streets where she had first played, the meals she had earned through music, and the small moments of encouragement that had kept her going. Despite the growing recognition, she never lost sight of why she played. Music was not just a means of survival or a path to fame. It was her voice, her connection to the world, and her way of honoring her father's legacy. Every note she played carried her story, her struggles, and her dreams, touching those who listened and inspiring those who had faced their own hardships. Years later, she returned to the square where she had first performed for a plate of pho.